ChristianGeekCentral.com.
Hey guys, Peter Franson here from ChristianGeekCentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. I'm not going to do my normal spoiler car format here because I didn't feel like sitting in my car talking about all this. I also wanted to kind of prepare some notes a little bit, and there's so much in Zack Snyder's Justice League to cover that I just wanted to approach it a little bit differently. So I've got like an armada of stickies on my desk, and I'm going to try and actually, if I think of it, provide timestamps for the YouTube version of this, so that if you want, and you can watch Zack Snyder's Justice League in the parts that it's broken up into. It's broken up into 6 parts, including like an arguable prologue part and then an epilogue part, and so that you can watch those. And maybe if you don't get through all of it in one sitting, but you want to jump into some spoilery stuff for how far along you are, then you can follow the timestamps. Hopefully below this video. We'll see if that idea works out or not. Anyway, let's just dig into full-on spoilers here. I've only watched the movie once, and so there's so much I know that I'm not going to mention that I'll notice on a second viewing or remember on a second viewing or whatever. Frankly, I just want to get through this stuff so that maybe I can start my second viewing. Anyway, prologue. We've got Superman's death revisited in the form of showing this like scream, which was not part of Batman versus Superman, but I think them kind of retconning this moment in. It happens in a moment of slow motion, so you can imagine that it's a soft retcon, but I was like we were seeing the waves of this scream go to all different parts of Metropolis and maybe even beyond that. I can't remember now, and I started thinking to myself, that's interesting. Why is that? What's the significance of that? And I think that becomes relevant much later on in the movie, and I'll get to that when I'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But it did strike me as odd. I was like, is this just kind of like a symbolic thing, talking about just the enormity of this moment and the enormity of Superman's death? And I do think it was that, but I think there was also a more than symbolic element, a practical element that Superman's death triggered, that it brought about, the impact that it had on something that's really related to the plot of Justice League. So that was an interesting moment. Then we see revisited Luthor in the waters, communing in some way with Steppenwolf, and my only note there was like, he's not in water. That actor is surrounded by CG water, and that makes sense. They did this in the middle of a pandemic and their resources were extremely limited. Those sets probably did not exist anymore that he was originally in. And so I think all things considered, they did a decent job. But the fact that it kind of stood out to me just a little bit is like, that's just a bit of a bummer. Let's see here. I loved this extended treatment of the Amazons surrounding the mother box. Even before, anything really happens with it, in this scene we see it just kind of like moving, making some sounds, and like a crack appearing and light coming out of it. All of this is mood stuff, in the Whedon, the theatrical cut, they got straight to the action with Steppenwolf and stuff, and I loved how they used moments like this and other elements to just build the ominous nature of the threat and build anticipation of what is happening, what is going to happen. That was just love that. Okay, so now, part 1. We've got Lois and Martha mourning in this part of the movie, and I so appreciated the extra time they gave to this. These quiet moments, lots of shots. I talked about this in my review, but Zack Snyder's a very visual director, and we see that a lot here. He takes time to show us Lois and Martha mourning. They're not talking to people about how sad they are. That's not how the time is used. It's just showing them quietly by themselves, remembering Clark, mourning Clark, and kind of figuring out how or if they're going to move on with life, and the fact that Martha was like, the farm was being foreclosed on and she was having to go away from the farm. I don't think that was in the theatrical cut, that whole business about the farm being, I don't remember. It's been since it's been like a good 9 months, I think, since I watched the theatrical cut. And you know what? I don't care that much to watch it again in order to see if something was or wasn't the same. I am happy to say goodbye to that experience forever, unless Riff Tracks makes a track for it. Then maybe I'll revisit it. Let's see here. Oh, this was so cool. You know, we had the introduction of Wonder Woman with what I called in my review the bank heist. It's not actually a bank heist. These guys are coming in, they're terrorists, and they're just kind of holding up. I don't even know if it was a bank. It was like a museum, I think. Anyway, when Wonder Woman is introduced, they have this kind of Eastern-sounding, kind of tribalistic kind of music, and which is really dominated or defined, I should say, by a single female vocalist. And there's this motif of a single female vocalist doing like some chant. It's a chant style kind of melody or kind of melodic movement stuff. And they use that a number of times throughout this movie. And I love it. It's like the new... But except it doesn't replace that. It just accompanies it. It's like the first sign that Wonder Woman is coming. It's like the shofar blowing in the distance, you know, before the army rises over. You know, it's this first little call out from the distance, and then we bring the driving guitar that with the tribal drums that I love so much and heard way too little of in Wonder Woman 1984. Just in general, I felt like after the disappointment that Wonder Woman 84 was. It's like there was enough new Wonder Woman action in this to feel like, you know, giving me the Wonder Woman experience I wanted to have this Christmas, you know? In fact, I would almost be willing to bet, I'm not quite, but I'd almost be willing to bet that there is more Wonder Woman action that is new that we've not seen before, at least technically speaking, in this than there was in Wonder Woman 1984. I don't know, I could be wrong about that, but it sure felt like that. Yeah, so really enjoyed that added musical motif that we haven't heard before and how they used it in this movie. I also really loved, and we saw this starting in the Part 1 segment, Steppenwolf's armor. Now, I don't think this was it either wasn't a thing in the Whedon cut or it just wasn't focused on like it was in this movie, but Steppenwolf has this, it's like this high-tech chainmail kind of armor that like has this rippling effect. And I'm not sure what exactly that's supposed to represent. I know that at one point he's got arrows lodged in him from Amazons, and he just uses that function of his armor to snap those things off, and then he's moving on. And so it's and I think there's another time that it kind of gets used in some interesting ways, but that's in a later scene, so I won't talk about that. But I just loved it. It was something they didn't have to do, you know, especially. With a movie like this, that it wasn't made on a shoestring budget, but I'm just thinking it's a remake of a movie that really failed in the box office, and the detail, the attention to that kind of detail was really, really cool. Let's see here. Oh, Steppenwolf also, just as a character, was much better motivated in this movie and provided more of a threat because of his ideology. In this Part 1 segment, when the Queen is riding away, trying to get away with the Mother Box and ultimately failing, if I remember correctly, I think that's when he got his hands on that Mother Box. There was another Amazon that was riding next to her whose horse fell over and presumably broke her back because she was dead just a few seconds later. But the Queen came down and knelt beside her, just showed great compassion for her. That's what I love about the Amazons in these movies and how they're treated, is they are so tough. I mean, like when she said to the Amazons when they were in the Mother Box chamber, sisters or women of Themyscira, or whatever she said, show him your fear, and they all with one voice said, we have no fear. I was like, dang, that is so cool, because it just speaks to that must have been, you get a sense of lore, you get a sense of history there. Like that was a drill or a mantra or something that was part of their training, like a call and response kind of thing, almost, that you would see in a traditional church service on a Sunday morning, where it's like the person up front has a call, and then there's a traditional response that comes after that. And so just seeing that sense of culture and bad mamma-jamma-ness that came out of that moment was really cool. But anyway, getting back to Steppenwolf, he says to her, you can't save her. You can't save any of them. You can't save anyone. And he's talking about this great darkness coming. I just felt like in this moment that was a Lovecraftian kind of thing. He's not just interested in defeating them. He is like demoralizing them in a sense, saying like, listen, you should like give up all hope, give in to despair. It's like he's wanting to conquer them on this emotional and psychological level in addition to just being a physical threat. And so I really liked that about Steppenwolf, is he was a herald of dread, a harbinger of despair. So that was really cool. Okay, getting into part 2 now. Let's see here. Oh, this was the first bit in the movie that I was like, we don't need this. If this was a theatrical release and we were trying to shave it down to 3 hours, this scene would not be in. And that's the fire beacon lighting ceremony. They did it pretty quickly in the Whedon cut. They said what the purpose was, that they were going to light this fire. They show her shooting off an arrow, and then it lands, and Diana finds out what it is and responds to it. And I think actually the business surrounding that, it could have stood to have been cut down to the very much more functional length that it was in the Whedon cut, but they kept it in here, and I didn't mind. Like I said in my review, this is not a theatrical release movie. It's a 4-hour stream it at home experience that you can take in pieces if you want, or carve out the time. And as long as you're going to carve out monstrous time, then might as well enjoy this moment too. And I did enjoy it. It was interesting, at least, just the sense of ceremony and stuff. But if there would have been more scenes like that, I think I would have started feeling like, oh, we don't need this. This is dragging a little bit. But that was the one thing that I thought in the movie was like, we don't really need this. But then I just accepted, there it is, and I enjoyed it. It was enjoy is actually too strong of a word. I found it interesting, which I think is the word I used in my review. Let's see here. Oh, and then we've got what I'm calling Diana's dungeon crawl. She responds to the beacon. She goes to the site, and I guess underneath this little Amazon's temple or whatever that the arrow went into and the signal lit up at, somewhere under that or nearby that, there's some kind of secret place that she went down into and saw this mural, this ancient mural that kind of showed the story of Darkseid's first invasion, and she started to learn about this looming threat that was coming. And I thought that was cool, just having this. Well, first of all, there was a nice little Wonder Woman moment. This is what I meant in my review when I was talking about how it's not filled with action, but there's nerdy stuff going on everywhere. And that's, she falls down in her civilian clothes, falls down and lands, and then walks further into the dungeon. So there's these little moments of super-powered type stuff. But just giving time for her to go into this dungeon where we get the sense of, ooh, what is going on here? What is she going to discover? Again, that's what so much of this movie is using its time for, to build that sense of the ominous, and like, what is happening here? And so I so appreciate and am grateful for the time that they gave to this. And let's see here. What else here? Oh, Aquaman music. This was something that I didn't like very much. After Aquaman, I think, talks to Bruce Wayne and basically says no, then he walks out on this dock while the waves are just crashing like crazy everywhere. And I talked about this in my review, so I won't get back into it that much, except to say that choice of song was not connecting with me. Holly said the same thing after the movie. That's like, there was one other musical moment that didn't connect with either of us either, but neither one of us could remember what it was. But we know it was related to the use of a pop song. That we liked the score whenever the score was in play, but there was another use of a pop song. We're like, this is a weird choice. This doesn't feel right. And so, but that was the glaring one to me. Is like, this, I'm not feeling it. The one kind of saving grace of it, as it were, was that I could tell from the selection of the song, as I said in my review, what we were intended to be thinking about, and that is that Aquaman is a haunted character. He's kind of at a rock bottom place. And so I knew I was supposed to at least be thinking that or observing that in some way. And so I still found it informative to my experience, and it was still a moment of character building. It's so interesting how music can change that. How it was a very different kind of moment. And in this movie, we just had an Aquaman that was significantly better motivated, better defined in terms of his motivations. Really appreciate. Man, I want to stop recording this, and I'm already taking way too long. I want to watch a little more of it again tonight. We had Desaad. Now, I didn't watch any of the trailers, so I didn't know we were going to see Desaad in this movie. It was very cool to see him. Interesting to see the interpretations of these characters, just in general, because they traditionally look like humans, basically, except for Darkseid. Kalibak looks not quite human, but like Steppenwolf and Desaad, they look like humans of a sort. And so to see them go in this much more monstrous direction, have them be of an alien race that's seemingly the same as Darkseid or something, I think is really cool. Now, there is word that we're going to get a New Gods movie, I believe. Is that accurate? What am I thinking? I think we are getting a New Gods movie. It's going to come after basically what will be the equivalent of Marvel's New Gods movie. But hopefully that's still the case, and hopefully in the wake of this movie, they will allow this movie to inform the choices they make with the New Gods movie. We'll see. Because the New Gods would feature Darkseid. I mean, that's he and his ilk are among the New Gods. Let's see here. I've talked about Steppenwolf's motives. He is an outcast. He is not in good graces with Darkseid, and so he's trying to basically earn back favor with Darkseid through this whole thing. So I just loved not only the motivation he provided as a threat to the world, but how his character was internally motivated, and we saw what was driving him. He was, wanting to get back into. He's trying to climb the totem pole on Apocalypse and get back into good graces with Darkseid. So, yeah, very, very cool. All right, part 3. We've got the Barry Iris rescue. This is at least some footage of this scene has been circulating for a while. It was part of one of the original trailers for the theatrical cut, but was removed and not a part of the movie. And so to see it fleshed out in full here was great. This character has been referred to as Iris, which in the comics is the woman he would eventually marry, his long-term love interest. Eventually they got married. But she's not identified that I could see as Iris, unless there was a badge she was wearing that had that name on it. I didn't notice. So it was interesting that they don't have to commit themselves to her being Iris. It was just this girl that, there was definitely a striking moment. I kind of felt like he wasn't just seeing an attractive girl. It's like this was supposed to be a love at first sight kind of moment when he sees her. And then when he rescues her, she sees him use his powers, gets a good look at his face, and so that would seem to set the stage for the Flash movie. Maybe that scene will be revisited or dipped back into. The footage will be reused or repurposed in some way so they can use it in the Flash movie as kind of a flashback moment. I don't know what they'll do, but I don't think it needs to be necessarily Iris that I can tell, but still a great scene. We've got this thing about Victor being a hacker with a heart. We get the flashback of his backstory before he became Cyborg, where he's on the football team, but he's also a hacker apparently, and helped a girl in his class who was failing her classes by hacking into the school system and changing her grades. And the reason for that, we learned from the mother, is that her family's house burned down, and so she was saying to the superintendent, how could you expect her to pass her classes that way, and what did you do to help? And I ultimately, from a narrative point of view, I can get on board with that enough to see that, yeah, Victor's a good guy. But good guy, quote unquote. But is that really justifiable? I don't think so. I think that, it was good that he was looking for a way to help her. But if her, grades are kind of getting all screwed up, and she, as a result, needs to take those classes again, then, she should take those classes again. I know it's probably just high school that we're talking about here, but she's just going to struggle in every class that comes after that, or college, or whatever, if she actually didn't learn the material at the time. So, I think it's, I don't know. I get what they're going for, but I think it was kind of a moment that was supposed to be the mother is speaking truth, and there's nothing wrong with her words right now. But it's like when you as a writer, you kind of will find moments and characters that you're like, okay, this is a very sympathetic character that everyone will love, and so I'm going to use them to be the mouthpiece for what I think is truth, because the audience is most likely to accept it if it's coming from this character, this that they love and care about and whatever, And so I think the mom was kind of like serving as that character. I don't know, is that what people mean by Mary Sue characters? I don't know. Anyway, let's see here. Oh yeah, this scene where we see the dad weeping over Victor because of the accident. Man, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. In the comics, Victor's dad, I think his name is Silas, as I think it is in this movie, is a much more heartless, uncaring character. And there's a much longer path to redemption that's kind of required there. I don't even know if that eventually happens or not, if they're reconciled or not. But in this, they seem to make it clear, at least in the Snyder cut, that they don't have plans for that. They're pretty much doing his whole arc here in this movie. And but to see him, weeping there was one way in which I found him more sympathetic. More of a likable character than I've seen him elsewhere. And I just appreciated that moment of character drama, father-son drama. It's Victor just was served so well as a character in this cut. Speaking of which, Victor's power over technology. Now, I knew about the level of power that Cyborg has in the comics because they revamped him around the time of the New 52 and placed him in the New 52 is why Cyborg is in this movie, because when they rebooted the DC Universe with the New 52, they were like, we're going to take Cyborg, a pre-existing character who's been around since like the 80s and Teen Titans. We're going to bump up his power level significantly, and we are going to, from the get-go, make him a founding member of the Justice League, And I think part of that was kind of the diversity initiatives they had going on at that time, but I have no problem with that. I think Cyborg is a cool character, and even more so with this reboot. Basically what they're saying in the reboot and here in this movie now, which was not apparent to me, or really obvious anyway in the theatrical cut, he has control over all technology. Earthborn technology for sure, but even, space age technology, or like not space age, but like a sci-fi outer space technology, And the fact they talk about how he could launch all the world's nukes with a thought, and like all the information in the world that's committed to machines in any way is available to him. So that was just a staggering acknowledgement of his power levels, and I really appreciate that because, when you have a story like Justice League where you've got huge heavy hitters like Superman and the Flash, and, well, I'll hold on the Flash for now, but Superman and Batman in his own way is certainly written to be very powerful, or effective is maybe a better word I could use. Wonder Woman, you are playing with the big dogs, and so you need to demonstrate that you, from a power level, have the right to stand side by side, and that you can be useful compared to these other guys. And Cyborg certainly can be useful. I mean, in my mind, I'm like, Iron Man who? Even at the height of Tony Stark's abilities in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he was not near where Cyborg freaking starts out. And that's one thing I've always loved about the DC universe compared to the Marvel universe is the characters on average are just far more powerful. And so you get to play with these characters that are almost questioning their own humanity at this point because of how powerful they are. And I find that kind of storytelling so interesting. So very, very cool. Nobody can keep secrets from him. That's why I assume he knew who Alfred was and could just say, hey, Alfred, I got this from here. It wasn't because I think he'd been talking to Batman. It's because he knows everything that's committed to a computer anywhere if he wants to. There's the whole thread of him kind of being a Robin Hood, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. I think that's kind of the second instance in this movie where we're maybe, seeing a little showing of the hand of the liberal politics of those writing the script here. That it's totally fine for him. We're supposed to feel totally fine with him stealing money from the bank because the bank is rich. The bank has lots of money. Here's a person that doesn't, so we should redistribute the wealth and stuff like that. But even though I would probably lean more on the right side politically than the left, I can still recognize the moral failings of capitalism, and so I can be sympathetic toward this system, and I think I would be tempted myself if I suddenly had intimate knowledge of so many different circumstances that people are dealing with, and realizing, you know what? Banks have insurance policies. They'll be fine. This is $100,000. They'll be fine. That's why they're paying, stupid insurance premiums anyway. And so I get that, and I can sympathize with it for the sake of this thing here. But I think we're going to have to figure out who he is in the future if he's in another movie, which I hope he is. It'll be interesting to see who Victor becomes. I'll comment on that a little bit more later on. But I love the little Alfred tea scene where he's kind of like micromanaging Diana as she's making tea a little bit. That was just a cute little moment, which again wasn't needed for the movie, but it was a bit of character development. And I think it's important that we like Alfred. I think it's important that we're reminded to care about Alfred because he is involved in this. It's not that his life is ever significantly threatened, but I think that because he's a player and is a significant ally to Batman and enables much of what Batman is able to do, I think it's valuable for us to care about Alfred. And so taking a moment to show some of his endearing idiosyncrasies is really great. Mera gets this cool moment that was one of my favorite moments in the movie when she's fighting Steppenwolf before Aquaman shows up. And one of the last maneuvers she pulls out of her bag of tricks is pulling the water from his body. When I realized what she was doing, that like water was coming out of him, and then eventually we saw some blood come. Before I even saw the blood, I realized what I was almost positive she was doing. And next to my wife, I couldn't contain myself. I would have contained myself in the theater. I really hate talkers in the theater, but under certain circumstances, one of them when it's just me and my wife, and we can pause and rewind. If I talk over anything, then it's okay. And I still don't do it that often, but I just let it go this time. I was like, oh yeah, do it. Because that's such a cool thing that she can do, and it's like that's what I would do. That's when you have that kind of ability, then you're like Magneto but more powerful. And I've often thought that a character with that ability could take on Superman, because he's still got lots of water in him. And if you can force that water to rip through his skin, you can give him a real bad day, So that was very, very cool to see that potential come out of her. Let's see here. Oh, and just in general, I would comment that Steppenwolf's face, the animation still looks like CG to me. It's still a CG face. But there's something in the design of his face that struck me as more bestial, more inhuman, less human. And so I found it more acceptable. I found it more quote-unquote believable, I think, because it was going into more of an inhuman direction. So I did appreciate that change. Okay, now getting to part 4. So we've got Steppenwolf versus most of the Justice League as they've been assembled so far in the sewers, and that had some really, really cool moments. A little bit of added footage here and there. We had the Flash doing some extra zipping around that we didn't see in the theatrical cut that I really liked. We had Diana, I think, getting more moments in the spotlight as she's fighting with Steppenwolf. So really cool. I found this was one of the first scenes where I noticed how the music was raising the stakes. There's this moment where Diana is diving after her sword, and Barry kind of goes into super speed mode and realizes that that this isn't going to work. What she's trying to do, she's not going to be able to reach her sword. And so he is just, I think he's trying to do some other things too. I'll have to watch the scene again, but he's trying to get her her sword. There's this sense in the moment before that, like she might be in trouble. And I think the music really helped with that. And so suddenly it went from, in the theatrical release, being this moment where it's like, oh, it's cool, Flash is doing this cool thing. But I wasn't like on the edge of my seat like, oh my gosh, Flash needs to do this cool thing, you know? And that's what I was feeling here. And it was because of the score. So yeah, really, really appreciated the score there. I also appreciated, maybe it was how it was edited, some of the dialogue maybe that was in the scene that wasn't before. I'm not sure what all the differences were, but when they're escaping and the water from Gotham Harbor starts flooding in, the water is a real threat. In the theatrical release, I felt like, oh, here comes the water, and I kind of just sensed, well, then Aquaman's going to enter the story. We've got water, right? So here comes Aquaman. And so I still found it predictable, and it made sense that Aquaman would show up at this moment. But the water was a danger, so it wasn't just Aquaman showing up and being cool. I felt the danger of the water to the other Justice League members. I think I also felt, I almost called him Wally, because Barry acts much more like Wally typically has historically in the comics than Barry ever did. But Barry's injury, he's injured, and so he can't really run at the end there, and so they needed someone to stop this water situation, and just the enormity of the water coming flooding in. Even after Aquaman came on the scene and started holding it off with his trident, there was still a sense of like, okay, he's doing that for now, and that's awesome. We're going to live a few more minutes, but we've got to get out of here because he can't hold this up forever or whatever, you know? So there was just a sense of danger throughout that whole scene that I did not feel at all in the theatrical cut. So really, really liked that. Let's see here. Oh, okay, here's a big spoiler. Martian Manhunter as Martha. Martha visits Lois and is just kind of wanting to connect with her and help Lois, hopefully, come out of her mourning in at least one sense, and that is not stopping her life. Because we learn that she has not been to work at the Daily Planet since Clark died. Now, we don't know how much time has passed, but it's probably at least months at this point, given, I think, how some things have... Well, maybe not. Maybe not. I think they still had a police line that was breaking off the monument, which had been kind of destroyed, and I think that happened maybe in the Doomsday fight. I can't remember now. So I guess we'll call it weeks. It's probably been weeks, but it's been more than days, I think. So anyway, she's getting in touch with her, and they're just sharing their grief. And I just really appreciated that whole scene, both for the catharsis of Martha and her expressing her grief, and then Lois and her expressing her grief, and just seeing that, feeling that with them was wonderful. And when I saw the red eyes, I didn't understand what was going on right away. Now, I think I had heard a rumor a long time ago that Martian Manhunter was intended to be in the Justice League movie, but I didn't have confirmation that he was definitely going to be in it. Or certainly not that he was going to show up in such a prominent way like this, where you'd see him as Martian Manhunter with CG or makeup. I mean, they went with CG, but seeing that whole thing. And I'd also heard, well, I knew actually from watching the commentary of Zack Snyder that he did for Man of Steel or Batman vs. Superman. He talked about it. He's like, well, there's John Jones being a very convincing human right there. Actually, he said the name of the actor, being a very convincing human, you know. And then I kind of put two and two together. I was like, oh, that's probably supposed to be eventually Martian Manhunter, you know. So anyway, I knew that would be, you know, if Martian Manhunter showed up, it would be in connection with that character. And so to see that happen was cool, but it was weird at first because the red eyes looked almost menacing, but the music wasn't saying menace at that moment. It was saying something else, something awe-inspiring, or I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but it didn't say danger, it didn't say menace, even though we had these red eyes. And I think that was important because I was like, are we segueing into a Terminator movie? what is happening? And then moments later, when it was Martian Manhunter, I was like, oh, no way. You know, that was so cool to see it happen in full like that when I did not know that that was going to happen. So I'm glad that I avoided teasers and trailers and all kinds of stuff that so much had been, that this movie had been talked about, I think. And it did not nullify the beauty of that scene between Martha and Lois. And the reason it didn't is because I, as a fan, I know Martian Manhunter. I know that he's this extremely powerful telepath. And so the way I would read that scene is that he was accurately portraying Martha because he could read her thoughts, know her grief, know intimately what she's feeling and going through, and could represent that perfectly to Lois. And I think it's wonderful. I mean, I wonder if Diane Lane was even told, you're actually... Well, no, because I guess I'd have to watch the scene again. Is it possible that she was not told, even when she exited and paused and looked down, did she know as an actress, okay, now you're going to turn into the Martian Manhunter, or was that something that was done purely in post? No, I think she probably knew. But anyway, but I love how she played that scene with Lois not giving any hints that she was not who she appeared to be, because that also then speaks well of Martian Manhunter's ability to shapeshift and to mimic, not just to change form, but to mimic, and the role that his telepathy can play in perfectly mimicking another person. So that was really cool. And I also felt like coming out of that it's possible that Martian Manhunter himself felt some of what Martha was expressing in that scene. You know, maybe he is, you know, feels that compassion when he's really able to read someone's mind and have their experiences and feelings imparted to him. Maybe he can empathize in such a strong way that he was not acting, in a sense, with Lois, and he was really letting these emotions out. But I don't know. So it's interesting to speculate on a scene like that. But he at least cares about Lois. You know, he came out of that and he turned and looked back at the door and he said, you know, the world needs you too, Lois, you know. So that was very cool. We also had in this section of the movie the indication that the mother boxes are afraid of Superman. And that is the callback to Superman's scream at the beginning of the movie and how significant that was. That I think what they were laying the foundation for there was the idea that the mother box became aware of Superman's death, and so was then activated at that point. You know, and that's kind of, I think, what we were supposed to be foreshadowing with Superman's scream and the significance of that. And that just, I mean, the whole idea of the mother boxes and how they could alert Steppenwolf and cause him to come. That just made so much more sense than, I think, him just randomly showing up. And yeah, I just appreciate the recontextualization that the mother boxes provided to this movie. Okay, now part 5. Dude, Flash can go at light speed. Was that I mean, I knew that from the comics, but was that a thing that they've said in the Whedon cut? Right before they were going to try and revive Superman, he's talking about how he can provide a charge by approaching the speed of light, even though it does weird things with time, and he doesn't like doing that. He doesn't like breaking the rule of going beyond the speed of light. And I thought that was so cool because we didn't have a sense of how fast he was. And in the Justice League theatrical movie, going into that, I was like, listen, the bar's been raised by Quicksilver in the X-Men movies, okay? You need to be faster than him. You need to be cooler than him. You need to be more, you need to wow us more. And the theatrical release just did not do that. Now, maybe I'm misremembering, and he did say something about light speed in that theatrical release, but I don't remember it. And so this is the first time I remember him saying anything about being able to approach the speed of light. And so right there, I was like, all right, that's what I want to hear. I want to know that we are going to deal with Flash in this cinematic universe as being as fast as I'm familiar with him being. Instead of depowering him so often in comics, not comics, but like in the animated series of Justice League, in the TV series, he can't go as fast as he can in the comics. And I understand why they do that. In a commentary of the Justice League animated series, they even said, listen, we know that Wally does not move as fast in this show as he does in the comics, and we know that that's kind of disappointing to fans, but we just kind of feel like once you got a guy that can move at light speed, what can you do to provide challenge for him, you know? And that was always frustrating to me. I was like, well, maybe read some of his comics and look at how they provided challenges for him, even though he's been able to move at the speed of light for a long, long time, you know? So it's always kind of irked me when I see representations of the Flash in storytelling that depower him because they don't know how to write him when he's truly at his peak powers as he is in the comics. Because that yes, it is challenging, but I love the unique stories that come out of that. That's the unique thing, again, about the DC characters, is they tend to be so much more powerful in scale and scope than Marvel characters. And so you have to write them differently. You have to challenge them in different ways. It is going to become more emotional because they can do so much. You are going to have to find ways to challenge them maybe emotionally more than just mere physical challenges, because they are often, you know, more than equal to most physical challenges you would put up against them. And so you have to dip into emotional challenges more often. You know, like the fear of, I don't want to go this fast because I might lose my humanity if I become that fast. It's scary to me to go that fast or whatever, you know. So I love that kind of stuff going on in the DC universe. And so to see that, like, okay, we've got a Flash now in this cinematic universe that can move at the speed of light, but he doesn't want to. I love this. I love it. Let's see here. Oh, I love that as they're getting ready to revive Superman, the big thing they're worried about in the last moments, trying to figure out, well, should we do this or not? Should we do this or not? Was not the fear of a Pet Sematary scenario. And that reference was in the Whedon cut, and that was what provided hesitation and tension in that scene as they're getting ready to resurrect Superman. Like, it wasn't a question of whether or not it was going to work in the Whedon cut, and I'm not even sure it was a question of whether or not it was going to, well, there was a question of whether or not it was going to work in this one, but it was so much more complex here because they want him to come back from the dead, and they hope that will be a significant part of the solution to defeating Steppenwolf, but it's not that they're so afraid of a Pet Sematary scenario. That didn't seem as present of a threat, even though, yes, he did end up kind of being not quite himself in the theatrical cut, as was the case also here. That didn't seem like, it seemed kind of silly. It seemed kind of silly the way it played out. And so I'm glad that the threat here was no. There's a threat here that Steppenwolf will be called here. He'll get the mother box, and his plan will be completed like that. And so the very thing we're trying to raise Superman to fight off could come all the more quickly because we're trying to resurrect Superman. Just from a writing standpoint, a dramatic standpoint, a tension standpoint, this was so much more interesting because it was such a risk. It was such a gamble, you know, that I just did not feel at all in the theatrical release. Let's see here. And then around this time, Cyborg has this vision of the future. And I think that's because of his connection to a mother box, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm wondering if we're going to find out at some point in the future, assuming that these movies are recognized as canon and they kind of pull some of these threads forward. I'm thinking that there's going to be some connection that Victor is able to have to parallel realities, multiple realities, or whatever, and that Bruce Wayne seems to be connected to for some reason as well. We don't know why Bruce has been having those dreams in Batman vs. Superman and then in this movie, but I think that there's probably some kind of parallel dimension type connection going on with him for some reason that will hopefully be explained later on, why he's able to have these dream premonitions. But anyway, in Victor's flash of the future, we see Darkseid. I did not think we were going to see this much of Darkseid in this movie, and we see him go into town in Atlantis. We see him using his Omega beams that was so cool to see that effect, and how it just darted around so fast, and it didn't outstay its welcome. Sometimes in the animated series, I felt like his Omega beams, they move slowly enough that I was like, I don't know, they don't seem like, it seems like you could outrun those maybe. They're just zigzagging for no reason or whatever. But here, they zigzag and they did the job really quick, and so that was very cool. We've got the premonition related to Lois's death. It's not clear how she died, but it looks like there's just a skeleton of her left. It'll be interesting to see how they continue exploring these future flashes, presuming that this continuity is honored in any way. And then we have this moment where, if you're paying attention, Flash actually turns back time a little bit. That cube dips into the water, and he's running so fast that then we see the cube raising back up again a little bit before he reaches it and charges the mother box so that they can, bring Superman back. But that was so cool to see, like, oh my gosh, he can move at light speed, and we're seeing an indication that he can travel through time. He can move so fast that he can go backward in time. Really, really gratifying to me as a DC fan. I also, let's see here, what else? Then we have Superman versus the League. And I like this. I don't need you to reference Pet Sematary in order for me to buy into this moment. It makes sense to me that when you've been dead, if you're able to come back into your body or whatever, let's set aside theological issues for a second, and let's say that either we're dealing with a purely physical world, which I don't think even this continuity would be necessarily limiting itself to. I think it probably is open to the idea of there being a non-physical component to humans and other persons in the universe. But let's say that it would make sense to me that if you're going to get your body revived after being away from it that long, or being inert for that long, that there would be something very disorienting about coming back after being gone that long. And so I didn't need the whole Pet Sematary gag to explain what was going on. I was just like, I was just ready to accept it. And the fact that I was able to accept it meant that I was okay with seeing this scene play out, which was very cool. You just, at some point when you're reading these comics, you always want to know, well, who's the most powerful? The only way to do that is for them to come up with story reasons for these heroes to fight each other. And so this was a cool little story reason for us to see the power levels of these characters tested, And there were some moments that were in the theatrical cut, like when Superman looks with his eye, Flash thinks, he's never known anyone to be able to move remotely as fast as him. And Superman still can't move as fast as him, but he kind of gets in the ballpark a little bit, which Barry is like really surprised and shocked about, so I love that moment. Let's see here. What is this? Flash? Oh, I already talked about that. Oh yeah, Wonder Woman headbutt. Jeez, I don't even know if that was in the Whedon cut or not, but like when he headbutts Wonder Woman, and then she kind of, it hurts, but she shakes it off, and then she headbutts him back, and then he ups the game. He grabs her, I think this was in the Whedon cut, lifts her up into the air, and then headbutts her again, and she goes slamming and turns the pavement into gravel. I don't remember that having the impact, no pun intended, in the theatrical release that it did. I mean, when my wife and I were watching that, I think at both at the same time, we just went, oh, it just looked like it really hurt. It was just brutal, I think, this headbutting stuff, so that was, that was really cool to see. What else? Wonder Woman, where are my notes? Have we done let's see, the headbutt. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, so we're talking about Part 5 right now. Okay. The gauntlets. I thought it was cool that Batman had these gauntlets that could allow him to momentarily stand up to Superman's heat vision. Because he's got to have something. And so it was cool that they set the stage by saying he made these gauntlets to help fight against, the agents of Apocalypse and whatnot. But then it was believable that he was surviving the heat vision, and that was important for having the character moment between the two of them, and so I really appreciated that little touch there. I think it's interesting how often Superman gets called Clark when there are people around that shouldn't know his secret identity. Lois shows up, they're calling him Clark. I think Batman calls him Clark. I'm like, there are cops around. Are they anybody noticing this? But I mean, this is an interpretation of the character where, once again, the only thing that is differentiating Superman from Clark Kent is a pair of glasses. I mean, he still looks like a GQ model when he's Clark Kent, and so I guess we kind of have to let some of those things go. But anyway, just a little noteworthy moment. Then we've got this moment with the Flash. Well, it actually happens before this, before Lois shows up, where Aquaman is getting ready to charge Superman, and then Flash is charging him from the other direction. Superman kind of like pivots and knocks him off balance, which causes the Flash to run into Aquaman, and they both go barreling, flying backward. I don't know that was in the Whedon cut. I'm not sure, but what I don't remember being in the Whedon cut was afterward when they're lying there, in the gravel. Aquaman just looks at him and just points at him in anger. He doesn't even say anything, just points at him. And it's a callback to when Flash ran into him and he's like, I am so sorry. I love how Flash, as freaking powerful as he is such a fanboy among these giants, and is so respectful of them and their power levels and all that kind of stuff. He's so endearing, so endearing. Okay, so part 6 now. You'd think we're getting close to the end, but I have like twice as many comments about part 6 as any other part. You know what? I should pause this because I need to make sure my boys are going to bed when they're supposed to. Okay, so then we've got, in part 6 now, we've got the Kent farm, just an extended time with Lois and Clark at the Kent farm as his memories are coming back to him. I loved Henry Cavill's performance when they're looking out the window and he says, reflecting on his mom, that she loved it here. And then he suddenly realizes, I loved it too. I loved it too. And you just see this tenderness in his expression. It's those kinds of moments where Cavill is doing some of his strongest acting that I missed so much in the Whedon cut, when he seemed to just be so artificial and stiff in this 1950s version, like this George Reeves version of Superman. It's just like, ugh. So to see this Clark come back, who has this tender emotional side, and was wonderful. Wonderful to see these memories coming back. Let's see here. So we've got, I think in this section, we've got more of these premonitions. My theory about the premonitions is that, I think I've already shared that with you. Later I'll go into like the alternate timelines idea because there's a reason to touch on that later on, but I think I've already said what I want to about my premonitions theory. It'll be interesting though. I mean, well, no, never mind. Don't forget that thought. The Unity. We had Steppenwolf talking about the Unity in the theatrical release. I was like, whatever, I don't know what that is. I don't know why it's such a thing that I should dread and why it's a thing that you want so much. But I really feel like it was fleshed out. We understood it was the unifying of the mother boxes, which then was going to trigger the Apokoliptian terraforming of Earth. That the Unity, I thought it was some like religious ideal of his or something, but it's not. It's an event, a very practical event that would terraform the Earth. And so I just wanted to touch on that as a point of appreciation. So Superman then, after a really nice moment with Martha Kent, when she comes to the farm, which I wish was maybe just a little bit longer, even so, I definitely felt like it was cut off way too soon in the theatrical cut. But I felt like it was long enough. It was definitely long enough here, but I could have enjoyed more. There was more that I could have enjoyed out of that time spent with Ma. But then he resolves that they brought me back for a reason. I need to find out what that reason is. And so he goes back to the ship, the Arctic ship, where his suits are at and stuff. And really kind of, that's when he gets, I think, comes into full memory of his past. We're getting voiceovers of Russell Crowe and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Kevin something. Kevin McLeod. It's not that. Costner. Kevin Costner. So yeah, that was great. You know, it didn't quite zero in on a character motivation in the way that I would have liked, but it brought back and reminded us of some of these things that were being built in the previous two Superman movies, particularly in Man of Steel. And but then he puts on the black suit. Now, I have no aversion to just Superman wearing darker colors. And as a comics fan, I know that he has worn black specifically after his death in order to more quickly regenerate his solar-based abilities. And it wasn't just the fact that he's wearing black, and black kind of attracts heat, but there was an explanation in the comics that, no, this suit is also internally designed to draw more from the sun and, you know, kind of speed up his charging process. And we see him fly up out of the fortress, and then in space, he kind of opens up his arms, which in part, is another reference to Jesus, and into, like, this is the culmination of his resurrection. You know, this is the full resurrection now, you know. Which reminds me, I think there's a parallel that I noticed, and I forgot to put in my notes here. Something about how it's only after... Oh, yeah. Batman, at some point in this last part, is talking about having faith that Superman will return. Having faith that Superman will return. And I thought, gosh, that can't be intentional. Because we as Christians believe that Christ was raised, and our hope is in both his resurrection and his return to save us and to usher us into this glorified existence. And I know that Snyder was raised actually in a home under Christian Science, which has some serious problems in its beliefs, despite having the name Christian as a part of it. It's got some major diversions from Orthodox Christianity. And but I can't help but wonder if maybe he's familiar enough, even though he was raised in this kind of like heavily distorted version of Christianity, even if you can even call it Christianity. I wonder if he would be aware enough of that concept. I don't know, but I took note of the fact that Batman was talking so much about having faith, and specifically it was around the time after, I almost said Jesus was resurrected, after Superman was resurrected, but before he returned. You know, there's this time in this story where he rises from the dead, he's seen by a few people, and then he's gone for a while. And it's only at the final moment when apocalypse is a great danger. Are you seeing this? When he returns to rescue and to, you know, lead us into a future where hopefully we can be like him, you know. So anyway, neat little moment there. But he's wearing the black suit, and it's, other than that hinted at moment where he's presumably recharging under the sun, which is equally symbolic, and I think compared to being practical, because there's no exposition there about that's reminding the audience he gets his powers from the sun, he's recharging right now, you know. So the choice to wear the black suit there, not very puzzling to me as a comic book fan, but there seemed to be something missing there for the average audience goer. I'll have to ask my wife what she thought of that moment. Oh, I loved how in the final battle, when they're coming to the site where the Unity is, where the mother boxes are being merged, they ditched the red sky that was in the theatrical release, and it was like a black, cloudy sky. I was like, yeah, that looks much more sinister and dark than the comic booky red sky that was in the theatrical release. And there was no Russian family that we kept cutting back to, so that was a welcome change as well. Oh, and I love this moment. We have in the theatrical version Aquaman saying "my man" to Cyborg after Cyborg catches him. He's like, "My man." I think they used a different voice take. I think in the theatrical cut, maybe it was the trailer for the theatrical cut. It was like, "My man," it was a little bit more party attitude kind of stuff. And here it was more subtle, and it felt more real. It felt more heartfelt. It felt more like a genuine connection between those two people, rather than just a celebration of this dude being cool and catching me, and then the whole sky surfing thing. Aquaman was probably one of the characters that benefited a little less from the additions compared to Flash and Cyborg, for sure. But this was still a cool scene. I think it was largely, if not completely, the same as we got in the theatrical cut when he's, fighting parademons. He can't fly, but he has this great aerial combat sequence, which I think is made all the more cool because he can't fly, yeah, so I really like that. And him just landing and then just kind of shaking his hair out of his face. It was a very metal moment. And then there's a moment later on with him and another moment with him and Cyborg where they're about to fight Steppenwolf, and I think it was Aquaman saying to Cyborg, "Ground Zero," and I wasn't sure if I understood him correctly, but then I realized, oh no, I think I know what he means by that. Or at least I think I know how this is going to play out, where he uses the trident and he slams into the ground, and at the same time, Cyborg lets loose a blast. And I don't think it's too much of I don't think it's unrealistic that they would know what they're talking about. I don't think we're supposed to believe it's some specific combat maneuver that they'd practiced, and I don't think we should say to ourselves, how could they know? How could Victor know what he was talking about when he said Ground Zero? I think it's a reasonable jump to make that he was not necessarily telling Victor exactly what he was going to do and what Victor should do, but just like, should we just set off a bomb? Let's just open up with the biggest thing, the biggest opener that we have in this fight with Steppenwolf. I think that's enough for me to believe that, the idea was conveyed. And so he does his most powerful shockwave move with the trident, and Cyborg cuts loose with a blast of his white noise, which I don't think they actually ever called it that. But and so that was a cool moment, not because so much of the action aspect of it, but because of where those characters had been previously. Aquaman was the one that challenged Cyborg in front of the others, accusing him basically of being in league with the agents of Apocalypse, of the planet Apocalypse, and in service to Darkseid in some way. And so to have that moment and then to have these two moments here was really cool, because even when Cyborg rescued him, he was kind of he made some remark that was implying that Aquaman was being ungrateful in that moment. And so there was still a little bit of friction there, but yet there was a moment where they were coming closer together because Aquaman said, "My man." And then here, a few minutes later, we see that they're even more in sync, even more trusting each other, even more working together. And so these kinds of moments were earned in this cut of the movie when they were not earned in the theatrical cut. We were supposed to be feeling this sense of unity and them coming together, but I was just like, I don't know, I didn't really get a sense of them being all that disunified. But in this cut, we really get a sense of that. And so, yeah, I really appreciated that. I like this line, I alluded to this in my review, where Steppenwolf, facing off against Wonder Woman, says that, how does it feel to have abandoned your sisters? And when you could have protected them from me, but you didn't. And they died screaming and begging for their lives, including your mother. So again, we've got Steppenwolf not just as a physical threat, but as this agent of despair, this catalyst of fear, and dread. I just love that. I love that touch. And then it lended dramatic weight to Wonder Woman when she attacked him right after that, because she called him a liar, but yet in situations like that, in stories, can the hero really be sure that the villain is lying? Maybe they're telling the truth. Sometimes they are, and it's tragic. In this case, he was not. He didn't, or did he? Did he kill her mother? I don't think he did. I'll have to watch again. I can't remember now. But anyway, it provided motivation in that moment for the action. And so, I was just like, kick it, Diana. And she really went to town. I'm feeling the impact of her blows and her attacking, and really loving when she does these awesome aerial moves that Wonder Woman can do. Even when the CG in that moment, I was like, yeah, her face looks a little plasticky there. I was still, it didn't take me completely out of the moment, because I was in it for the emotion that Diana was feeling in that moment, And so, yeah, I really, really just appreciated that. Let's see here. Oh, I love this Flash energy countdown where he's trying to do the energy surge again, but he has to get a bunch of speed going to make that happen. And so we've got this countdown that's very timing precise. I don't remember what that moment was. I might just put in the Justice League theatrical cut and just skip to certain parts and remind myself what was different about them. Yeah, I don't remember that being a thing where he was running around really fast and trying to build up a charge so that he could do this thing with the mother box. I think Superman just came in and saved the day or whatever. But and then he gets injured right at the moment when they need him most. He gets injured. And then that was great. I loved him getting hurt that much. I loved him getting up and saying, it was almost played for comedy. Maybe it was when he says, like, I just got the wind knocked out of me, But then and I almost was ready to laugh in that moment. I wasn't sure how I felt about that joke. That was one of the jokes that didn't quite land if it was supposed to be a joke. But then when the camera panned down and we see that, oh no, he's been injured. And I'm thinking, I thought it looked really serious. And the way he was treating it, I thought it was one of those moments where, like, the hero doesn't realize how badly they've been hurt yet. They don't realize they're about to die. They got a sword sticking out of them and they haven't seen it yet, So when I saw that injury, I was like, oh my gosh, I verbally said that. And so I just appreciated the stakes, the gravity, the cost, the pain that the heroes had to go through in this climax. Now, one thing that I do think felt a little too easy was Superman. Superman felt too powerful to me in this climax. But this is, the first time we've gotten a sense of how powerful he is compared to, say, Diana. He wasn't fighting Wonder Woman in Batman versus Superman, and we saw him fighting Doomsday, but that's the only enemy we've seen both him and Wonder Woman fight, and so we haven't gotten a real sense of the difference in power levels between those two characters. But it seems so enormous at the end here when he comes in and Steppenwolf is like, for Darkseid, and brings his axe down, and Superman interposes his body at super speed at the last moment. This is when he shows up to save the day. And it just effortlessly stops. There's no impact that registers at all. Superman doesn't move an inch. It's like nothing. And he just says, I am not impressed, or not impressed or whatever, It felt a little too casual to me. It was a cool moment in some ways, but it just felt like Steppenwolf was absolutely no challenge to Superman. And maybe at that moment, dramatically, they felt like that's what we needed, but I guess I would have liked Superman to have been someone that just, like, significantly tips the scales in the favor of the Justice League winning this, not being a one-man Justice League himself. And that felt a little too close to, he's a one-man Justice League, why do we need any of us going forward from here? But thankfully, it's very soon after that, we saw a real reason why we needed other people with different power sets, namely the Flash, because he was not able to get the energy surge to the mother box in time, and so Darkseid succeeded. There was unity. It was going to terraform the earth and all that kind of stuff. And then the music shifted, and we got this nice cascading, arpeggiating music that did ding, 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 ding. Just a different tone altogether. A tone in the music that said wonder. A tone that said that something otherworldly was about to happen, and in a good way. We were seeing an unveiling of something, you know, and what we were seeing was I get shivers just saying that. My hair started standing up. We see an unveiling of the Flash's powers, and him realizing, I've got to do what I told myself I would never do. I've got to break my rule about going faster than the speed of light. I got to go way beyond the speed of light. I need to turn back time, you know? And so in one sense, it was like almost a callback to the old Christopher Reeve spin around the earth, turn back time thing, but done so much better in a way that is more realistic, you know, I guess, at least according to movie time travel rules. Because it's not the actual rotation of the earth that makes time pass. But anyway, that was so cool to see him break that rule, to have that moment where he's kind of, even though in hindsight, it's a little bit odd him talking out loud to his dad when his dad obviously can't hear him, but I think that, you know, maybe we kind of mutter things. Some of us talk out loud to ourselves, and he's a super duper introvert, so I believe that he would talk out loud to himself pretty commonly, you know, and so for him to just be quietly muttering these things out loud, thinking out loud to his dad, you know, and just hoping that his dad will know that his son was one of the greats, because he's thinking that he might die doing this, you know. It's not that it's causing him pain. That's what was so interesting. It's not that it was causing him pain. He seemed totally in his element, but he observed that it does weird things to time. He just didn't know what was going to happen, you know. So, but he goes, not only builds up a charge again, he goes back in time just a few seconds to get back to that moment before it was the point of no return, and gives the mother box the charge that it needs, and that was very cool. I think that we're going to need in the future a reason why the Flash can't just do that whenever it's convenient. They'll have to be sure the next time, between now and the next time Flash is in a scenario where the audience would want him to turn back time, we need to establish cost and risk for that and make sure that this is understood to be a one-time thing. Otherwise, that's going to remove all tension. But doing it this time, such a gratifying moment. I almost got chills. I almost felt like tears welling up, you know, to see this kind of moment that I've, you know, had in my mind and my thoughts actualized, you know, in a sense, in front of my eyes and become that much more real. I think that's one reason why some of these types of experiences can be emotional for us, because inside we want a better world, a greater world. We want to have a greater existence where we're more powerful, where things are set right. You know, we want to see these things come about. And so when you see something actualized in live action, it brings it one step closer to almost it being real. And that can be a very moving, emotional experience, sometimes for reasons we don't understand. But I suspect that it has something to do with that internal longing that God has placed in us for eternity. So anyway, okay, I got to tuck my son in bed, and then I'll finish my thoughts here. Okay, Wonder Woman, after Superman comes back and she's ready to engage Steppenwolf in fighting again, she's got this smile on her face. It's almost a sense of ease because she realizes, dude, Superman is back. It's over for you. It is over for you. And so I did kind of like that smile. I also liked that Superman wasn't saying cheesy lines about truth and justice and stuff like that, like in the Whedon cut. That was just like, oh my gosh, this just feels like so hammering so hard. We're so sorry Superman's been angsty up to this point. Now he's the 1950s father you all wanted. So yeah, I was glad that all that stuff was absent, and the really forced laughing as they're collapsed after defeating the bad guy. Man, that was rough in the theatrical cut. So then we get, in the wake of Steppenwolf's defeat, a portal opening up, and we see Darkseid, we see Desaad, not through the transmitters anymore. Which, by the way, I really like those transmitters. You know, we had established that the Kryptonians could communicate through like these almost like metal pin. You know those things you get at like gimmick stores where it's like all a bunch of pins in a board, and you can push up under the bottom of them, and then the shape of whatever it is that's pushing up in the bottom will show through in metal pins. We saw that Kryptonian technology had that kind of metal thing going on with it, and Apokoliptian technology has this molten metal kind of vibe to it, with dripping bits of molten metal. I really like that. Very cool. Really, even though you can look at these things and say, well, shouldn't they have technology that's way better than that so you can see a much clearer representation of the person you're talking to long distance? Yes, I get that, But what are they saying? What are they trying to convey about this character or this reality? What they're conveying through that technology is that this is a hellish place. That, like, when we think of apocalypse, there should be conjured images of like the traditional visuals associated with hell, and so it's setting a mood. It's establishing a mood and a tone, and I really dig that. I really dig that a lot. But we also see Granny Goodness. Any of you guys notice that? They never call her by name. I'm wondering, there was a moment where Victor is interacting in the mother box with this fake reality, this fake version of his own family, which ultimately he rejects. And in the moment of rejecting it, it kind of morphs and shifts into a figure that has this wild-looking white hair. And I'm like, Granny Goodness is classically known for brainwashing people. I wonder if this was an attempt from Granny Goodness to brainwash him. And that's mostly a hint to fans, but maybe they'll lean into that and explain her role when she reappears in a future movie. I keep saying when, like this is going to be a thing that changes the course of the DC movies, and I can only hope that it will. I'm speaking very optimistically at the moment, because so far as I'm looking at reviews, the majority of the reactions I'm seeing, at least from YouTubers that are really popular for their reviews, and outlets that are really popular, most of them are at least giving it a good or great score. With only one I've seen so far, it's like, this is lame, this is awful, and it's a video game review site, so who cares? Let's see here. Yeah, I almost cried over that Flash moment. Coming back to that, I'm getting a little out of sequence here. Almost cried over that Flash moment with the music and when he's talking about his dad. Really cool. Oh, and he made this reference in that to making your own future. And his dad had said something like that. He's like, I want you to, go make your own future. And I was like, I wonder if there's any chance. I didn't even quite complete the thought in my mind during that scene early in the movie. But half of the thought occurred to me that, like, I wonder if that's a reference to time travel in some way. Make your own future, and it turned out that it was. So in this moment, coming back to Victor Stone, when he is rejecting this false representation of his family that's trying to coax him into just kind of giving up, essentially, he rejects it by saying, "I'm not broken," because something that was said by one of these fake versions of his dad or mom or something like that said something about, I can fix you, and he said, "I'm not broken," and that is a mantra, that is a motto, maybe is a better phrase, a better word, that has been floating around in different forms for a number of years now. In the same way that, like, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was follow your heart, do what feels right, and all that kind of stuff. Now I'm seeing more and more of this idea, this rejection of the idea that we are broken. And specifically the word broken is used. And now it may have ties, I'm not sure. I'd have to study it and the people who use this phrase in entertainment writing more closely to see if there is a link. I think it might be linked in some ways to those who are kind of affirming or promoting the LGBTQ movements. But I think in general, much like follow your heart, do what feels right, this is not something definitive that we should say about ourselves. If we're saying that we're not broken, I mean, that's another way of saying there's nothing wrong with us. Like, really, well, what I want to say in those moments is, what's your definition of fixed and not broken? Like, what about compared to Jesus? Do you have no dysfunctions? Is there no part of you that's broken down and maybe needs some fixing compared to Jesus? And so I think it's, we're just lowering the bar. Instead of, like, looking at ourselves and saying, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe there's something that needs fixing or healing or improving. We don't do that. We just say, no, I'm going to take the bar, the standard of virtue, and I'm just going to bring it down to where I'm already at conveniently and say, no, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I am not broken. And I think one of the reasons that seems to be done is because people are equating their status of being broken or unbroken as being equivalent to their value. That if someone is broken, then that must mean they are of less value. And that really strikes me as being born out of some kind of a utilitarian worldview where we're only as valuable as what we can provide in terms of usefulness. I don't know if there's any connection there or not. But what we as Christians ought to be affirming again and again is that being wrapped up in sin and brokenness has nothing to do with our value. That we are not at all less valuable because while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So if being sinners reduced our value or made us of little to no value, then why in the world would Christ die for us? But the truth is that Christ died for us because he looked at us in our fallen, broken mess of a state and concluded they are of tremendous value. They are worth going through this, And so I think that a good thing for us to try to do as Christians in our conversations is to make, when we see a window of opportunity, to make differentiation between being broken and flawed and being of great value. That those two are not connected at all. And so there's no reason to say, I'm not broken. We can, in complete freedom and confidence, say, I am broken. I am a mess. I do need fixing. I am so glad that God loves me somehow in the midst of this brokenness that I cannot seem to shake, or that I'm not even strong enough to want to shake, It's the flash moment at the end. I'm kind of going back and forth. We got these two little things here, these two little scenes. But the flash moment makes that victory earned. If I didn't say that before, I want to make sure that I say that Superman made things way too easy, but the flash moment makes the victory earned because there was cost involved for the Flash. See here, Darkseid face off. Oh, Darkseid face off. Okay. So there's this moment when all is said and done, Steppenwolf gets his head cut off. That was great. And it was great that Wonder Woman did it, And as some other reviewer commented, unburdened by the restrictions of PG-13, Snyder could have Wonder Woman cut loose as the warrior she is. In comics, Wonder Woman has been killing for a good while. I don't think she does it casually, but she is a warrior. And when the situation calls for it, at least in her mind, she will not hesitate to kill. And Superman was content to just throw him back to Apocalypse. Wonder Woman was like, no, he will never be a threat again. And maybe some of that was tied into how personal he had made it with her, with what he did to so many of her sisters. I love that he got his head cut off. That was great. But then there's this face-off moment where there's no words exchanged. It's just the Justice League looking at the upper echelon and on Apocalypse, including Darkseid himself. And then the portal closes, and that was a cool moment. But what would have been cooler is if there would have been a little bit of an exchange. I'll always remember in Superman the Animated Series, the first time Superman met Darkseid, after spending episodes building up to that moment, fighting his henchmen and Calabac and stuff like that. He looks at him and says, "Who are you?" And Darkseid didn't say anything. He just lances out with his Omega beams, blasts Superman, who had just kicked the crap out of Calabac, but now in this moment was completely crushed and screaming in agony, and then collapsed because he couldn't do anything else but collapse in a heap of uselessness. And then Darkseid says, "That is who I am," and leaves. Doesn't even say his name. He just delivers anguish and says, that is my identifier. That's all. That's the essence of who I am, is agony in your life, you know? Agony for you, like you've never felt before. What a great moment. And so even if they would have ripped off that moment, just reproduced it here, I would have liked that. I would have liked something from Darkseid that left us with an even stronger impression that this guy is so bad news. This guy is so bad news. So so that moment could have been improved. Still was a great moment. I love that they brought up the anti-life equation and just leaned into that, and like, we're going to talk about that's kind of a nerdy comic booky thing, and for them to bring that to the forefront is like, that's the end game. That's where this is all going, is anti-life equation. And I love how they up the stakes in talking about the anti-life equation. Did you notice that? They boosted it out beyond the stakes that Marvel has established up to this point. Marvel has had, I don't think they did this intentionally. Maybe they did. I don't know. But you kind of have to. If the audience has seen What's His Dude with the Power Glove, then, Darkseid was there first anyway. Power Glove guy, Thanos, is actually a knockoff, by admission, I believe, of the creator of that character, a knockoff of Darkseid. Like, we need something like Darkseid, and so they created Thanos, who looks a lot like him and behaves a lot like him and stuff. If Zack Snyder did make this change since watching Endgame, I wouldn't blame him. I think it's an appropriate one. But, circling back, what I was going to say. The anti-life equation doesn't just remove free will from everyone in the universe. He used the word multiverse. So we're talking about multiple parallel realities, which the DC universe has already hinted at in the Flash TV series, and bridging the movie universe with the TV universe, at least having them being part of a shared multiverse. I think that was even established before Infinity War and Endgame. And any hints that they might be going in the direction of parallel realities and stuff. So, and from what I hear, the Flash movie is really going to be leaning hard into multiverse type stuff. So to expand the threat and say that, this is a threat not just to this planet, this galaxy, this space sector, this universe, but the freaking multiverse, And at some point it's just like, all right, it's too big to really do much more for me than saying the universe, but still kind of cool. And let's see. Oh, and then we got the Justice League hero shot at the end where they're all lined up together. And it felt earned. It felt earned. Like, yes, this is really an achievement now to see them all side by side like this, because the journey we were just taken on was a journey of seeing them not side by side, a journey of them very slowly coming together and with resistance and conflict in the midst of that. And so it felt very satisfying to see them together, not just from the geek standpoint of, oh, look, these big well-known heroes are all in the same shot together, Marvel's already done that, but I felt like here, and I'm not saying Marvel hasn't done this, but I felt like here what was most significant about it was how it was earned by the journey they'd been on, So really appreciated that. All right, let's talk about the epilogue. We've got Victor's dad. He died, and he's got kind of a quote-unquote redemption arc. I use that as a shorthand. I really don't like redemption being, thrown around so much that way. But we see that he did love his son, and he acknowledged that he made a bunch of mistakes and would change them and fix it all if he could. But here's something else that he said. He said, everything breaks, Victor. And so even though Victor, in that triumphant moment that we're supposed to feel with him, said, I'm not broken, we still have a character that at this point we are supposed to sympathize with. So he's a mouthpiece character at this moment whose words we are supposed to accept as true. And he says, everything breaks, Victor. So it's almost like the movie wants us to affirm that we are not broken, but then at the same time contradicts itself by saying everything breaks, and we should accept maybe that we are broken, And so I don't know what the intent was. That does seem to conflict a little bit, but I'm glad this line is in there. Just saying, listen, our brokenness is a reality, and we should face that and figure out how to move forward from that, instead of being in denial of it. There's a sense in which it's okay that you're broken. Not, I wouldn't say okay in the sense that, yeah, just stay broken, it's okay. No, 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 no. But it's not, being broken does not mean that you are defeated and without value, So I'm glad that they put that in there. Everything breaks, Victor. We've got a nice Aquaman lead-in. At his last scene, he says, I'm going to go see my father. It made me want to watch Aquaman again. And Holly hasn't seen it, and so maybe we will in the not-too-distant future. But I know the Aquaman movie does not have the same tone as this. It's not near as enjoyable as this. I did enjoy it more when I watched it the second time at home compared to when I watched it the first time in the theater. So I'm open to watching it again. And it has some nice father-son stuff going on a bit in that movie that I would enjoy seeing again. And I think just especially after this movie being such a nice introduction to Arthur that we really didn't get in the theatrical version, and seeing them playing up the feel of the conflict that he feels against the people of Atlantis, and why he doesn't feel like that is his world. I feel like this movie primes me more to see an Aquaman story now. Whereas I remember watching the Aquaman movie and just kind of being confused. I was like, does this take place before Justice League? After? I don't know. This is weird. This is weird. And now I feel like this has primed me more, at least dramatically, to be invested in the story about Aquaman, So I'm kind of curious how I'll feel giving that movie a third try at some point, maybe in the not-too-distant future. Mera's red hair. I just noticed again that her hair is not near as red in this movie as it is in the Aquaman movie. In the Aquaman movie, it looks so red, it looks like a wig. It looks artificially red. And I don't like that red. I do prefer going more in the direction that this movie was in. Actually, I could do with it being more red than it was in this movie. So maybe somewhere in between there in future movies would be nice. I love this scene with Barry and his dad in jail, in prison at the end. There was a little bit of humor there, he was like, Dad, you're going to get maced again, So there was a nice joke there, but there was also this really heartfelt, serious moment when his dad expresses how proud he is of him. He's like, my son's got his foot in the door. His dad has been so worried that his son was just not moving on and building a life for himself. And now this job that he's getting says so much. You could tell it said volumes to his dad that, like, my son's going to be okay, my son's going to be okay. And I could connect with that. Even though my sons are not near young enough to need to support themselves at this point, I could relate to that, And then for him to have that for Barry to have that much more subtle moment where he's not being silly, not doing the funny little voice or whatever, but just saying, thanks, Dad, And it's just a great moment to end that representation of Barry's story, and I can't wait to pick it up in a Flash movie. One question that I think is going to need to be answered, I briefly alluded to this earlier, in any future story that Cyborg is in, is who is Victor without his pain? I was thinking about that at the end, as his father's voiceover is, playing as providing narration for all the different epilogues, at the end of the movie with all the characters. He is like laying to rest his parents, embracing kind of like his identity as Cyborg and this state that he's in. Like, this is what his life is now, and he's embracing it. All of his story, both before becoming Cyborg and while he was Cyborg, was his pain. The pain of not having his father involved and proud of him in his life. The pain of being a monster and not being able to fit in. Now he seemingly has finished his arc at the end, and so from a dramatic standpoint, I can't think of a reason for him to continue in anything. They need to come up with something else for him, and I don't know what in the world that would be. So that'll be a very important thing, because the actor's acting style was pretty straightforward. It was about the pain. It was about the bitterness. It was about the struggle. I don't know who Victor is in terms of what kind of personality he has. I know that, he's got a heart for the underdog, but that's it. Whereas Wally, I did it again. Whereas Barry we have a clear sense of his personality. He's an introvert. He doesn't have many friends. He is got a sense of humor. And he also has this major struggle with his dad and what's driving him with his dad, and all those things are still intact at the end of this movie. He still is he's working at a crime lab. So he's not going for the degree or whatever necessarily that he was planning on going for. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, I don't know. Maybe he's doing both at the same time. But he's still clearly pursuing a life in the justice system so that he can undo the injustice done to his dad. That's intact. And so is Aquaman's motives and his story. He is not all wrapped up in a bow. Wonder Woman certainly isn't wrapped up in a bow because of the loss she's experienced with her sisters, Batman, well, we'll get to, he still has pain. I think Superman's back and that's great, but he still has the mindset of preparing for Darkseid. And he's going to have other kinds of problems too, probably, So Victor is the one that I'm just like, they have their work cut out for them. They almost have to start from scratch in figuring out what makes him tick in a future story with him. We see Batman in his brief little epilogue looking at the bat symbol, bat symbol in the sky. He's standing on top of what is clearly a Batmobile modeled after the one in The Dark Knight Returns, the famous story by Frank Miller about an old, aged Batman. And so I'm thinking to myself, now remember, this movie was made years ago, before all the stuff happened with Zack Snyder that kind of set him for, up until this point, outside of making DC movies. And it just looked like the direction the suits wanted to go was away from whatever Zack Snyder was planning on for the DC cinematic universe. So this may have been something that is part of a plan now that is never going to happen. And maybe it wasn't ever part of a plan. Maybe it was just a cute little nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Hey, kids, remember this? It's from one of the most iconic Batman stories ever. But I can't help but notice, here we have Ben Affleck playing a Batman who is, from the beginning, very advanced in his career and even kind of getting, approaching, what is going to be too old to be Batman at some point. Batman versus Superman was modeled, and in some ways, echoed elements of the conflict between Batman and Superman in Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. And so I wonder if that there either was an intention to launch into a Dark Knight Returns adaptation after this, or if that was never an intention, and they just kind of like, hey, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, here we got kind of an older Batman, here's something from an older Batman story, from a story about an older Batman. Or was this something that, in fact, was just added now, was not part of the original vision, but Zack Snyder's just like, hey, as long as we're here, as long as we're doing this. I hope, this is probably unreasonable, but coming away from this movie, Ben Affleck had said that he is done with the character, And yet, after saying that, and being really pretty firm about that, he came back to do reshoots for this movie. You might say, okay, well, those are reshoots for a movie he already was a part of and is going to want to see done, justice, no pun intended. But then now we also have confirmation Ben Affleck is appearing as Batman, or at least as Bruce Wayne, in the Flash movie that's coming up. So what's going on? Has he abandoned this character or not? I am wondering if he is just softly tipping his toes back in the water, maybe he agreed to do the Flash movie because he anticipated people really liking this Snyder cut, and maybe it giving a new lease on what they had intended to do with the character. I don't know. But my hope is that he will be willing to come back and be Batman in the future. I understand that it took a major toll on him personally because of what the role apparently required. Maybe it was the training. I'm not sure what specifically about the role just brought a lot of hardship into his personal life. But if it's a choice between harming his marriage, which I don't know if their divorce has been finalized or what, but I mean, obviously it should be a given that I prioritize his personal life, his family life, over any kind of career stuff. But my hope would be that he could play Batman in the future in a way that's not going to damage his life. Because I really appreciated what he brought to this role in both Batman vs. Superman and here. It's a different flavor of Batman, to be sure, but I really liked it, and I would like to see more of this Batman, especially after this Justice League movie. You know, I feel like we are prepping for more dangers to come. I want this Batman to be the one that's going to help with that. And I think there's maybe a chance of that. If he's coming back to be part of the Flash movie, I think there's a chance. Maybe we'll never get another Batman solo movie with Ben Affleck. I think that's probably, there's a good chance that we won't get that. But maybe apart from the solo movie that is coming out and the actor playing him there, whose name I can't remember, maybe he will be the main Batman that is in all the crossover, and team movies and stuff like that. And that would be great. Let's see here. He, in the last scene, I think I could tell in the epilogue when he interacts with Martian Manhunter, I think I could tell that this was definitely a reshoot scene, because if you look at his arms, they are much skinnier than his arms were in Batman vs. Superman. And even if, there was a good chunk of time between Batman vs. Superman and Justice League, so maybe during the main shooting of Justice League, his arms weren't as big as they were in Batman vs. Superman. I would totally believe that, and that's fine. In fact, his arms were still bigger than mine, I'm sure. But I guess my point is, okay, he's done the movies where he took his shirt off to portray Batman, He can still portray Batman and not take his shirt off. Just wear suits and long-sleeve shirts as Bruce Wayne and get him in the suit. We don't need to see him shirtless. We don't need to have the actor prove to us that he's all muscular. We saw it once. We can just transfer those memories to this new thing and assume that the character is still just as buff or whatever. Or you can lean on the fact that he's old and maybe he's adding some little servos and things to his bat suit to help keep his strength capabilities up. I don't know. There's a lot of room for different possibilities that would allow Ben Affleck to play this part and not kill himself in the process. So anyway, yeah, hopefully the filmmakers would see that, if that's the thing that was holding him back. Let's see. Oh, in the last moment with Flash, I just love seeing Ezra Miller's performance there, as he just expressed the joy of running. He put his arms out behind him with this big grin on his face. I think he even closed his eyes momentarily. He was just loving running, loving feeling his, the use of his body, the use of his power, just embracing that experience. He is so endearing of a character in this. I love the changes they've made. I mean, Barry Allen, until maybe the New 52, they've not really tried hard to define his character in a way that makes him interesting. He's been pretty straight and narrow. And yes, this character is not at all like that. He's, if anything, more like Wally, but even then he's different from Wally. Wally's not awkward and this kind of fish out of water in the same sense that Barry is here. But I love this Barry, and I'm totally cool with them moving forward with this interpretation of the character, especially in a Justice League context. Well, maybe not especially, because I would like his character like this in a solo movie too. But he's just such a nice contrast to the other characters, and he represents us, the audience, just in a sense of wonder as he walks into the Batcave, and he's just like, yes, So I just that just put a nice bow and it was a perfect final shot to see Ezra Miller's Flash in this movie. It just gave me joy for him to see that. We saw Superman. We saw, apparently they kept the ending where Clark Kent is back, so they're going to have to explain why he's back from the dead, because at the end of Batman vs. Superman, there was an article saying we lost Clark Kent and he's dead, So I don't know what they're going to do with that. But he pulls open his shirt, still wearing the black suit. That's a very interesting choice, especially since, yes, this movie is for the fans, and it's more for fans than it ever was going to be. This is a freaking fan movie, But even that, I'm like, but even in the context of the movie, you didn't mention that it's helping him recharge his powers. In fact, I'm not even sure that's what you mean it to be, because Superman has spread his arms out and felt the absorbing of the sun in Batman versus Superman when he got blown up with the nuke, and then before he came back down, kind of had a similar moment. He wasn't wearing a black suit then, so he doesn't need the black suit to kind of get a little charge like that. So we don't really have an in-story reason for the black suit at this point. So it's a really interesting choice. I was kind of ready for his return when he came back to show up to fight Steppenwolf. I was ready for him to be in the traditional colors at that point. And at the end of the movie, if you're going to have the moment where he goes into an alley and pulls open his shirt, I want to see the traditional colors. That's the sense in which now he is restored. And that's what his story arc was about him being restored to life and being this symbol of hope and being like this beacon of light. And the black costume just doesn't reflect that in the way that the traditional costume would. I'm not saying he needs to go as freaking bright blue as the Whedon costume went. I don't really want that necessarily. In fact, I have some cautionary concerns about that based on my experience of it in the Whedon cut, but it was also accompanied by the 1950s version of Superman, so maybe that was the real problem. Anyway, I think going forward, they can deal with the black suit pretty easily by having him wear it at the beginning of the next movie he appears in, and making some comment, some bit of exposition that explains that he's been wearing it lately, people have noticed him wearing it, but like, okay, now I've gotten my charge back up, so I'm ready to take it off, or whatever. And they can write that much more eloquently than I just expressed it. But that way, I think it would be reasonable to, even if you treat the theatrical cut as canon, to say that, okay, no, he didn't come back to life wearing that suit, but he realized soon after he wasn't quite at his max. He was getting drained a little more easily, so he started using this black suit. And that way, you have this bottleneck where both versions meet. The Snyder cut had him wearing the black suit from the moment he came back from the dead, and then following the Whedon cut continuity, we would just say that the first time we saw him wear the black suit was at the beginning of whatever next movie he's in. So there are ways to write around some of these differences and make both movies lead into the same whatever comes next. So you just have to be a little bit clever about it. But I do think that they should probably deal with that black suit as soon as possible the next time we see him. Just why is he wearing it? Because it was lacking a bit in its reason in this movie. The Luthor swap. The Luthor swap worked for me better at the end of this one because they didn't stay on that actor laughing maniacally for as long. It was like cartoonish to me in the Whedon cut. It just was over the top. And here, it was actually a little bit creepy. They didn't linger on that initial shot of the guy's face when he turned around as long. And then they cut to the guard's reaction. Then they cut back to the crazy inmate that agreed to swap for Luthor, apparently. And he kind of like, boo, ah. He kind of like does this thing. I mean, he's just being really weird and creepy, like some, crazy person on the street, and they've got multiple personalities. It was creepy. So that worked better for me. Then we see Deathstroke again. Dialogue's a little bit different. There's no implied reference to an Injustice League. In the Whedon cut, Luthor says, I think Deathstroke makes some comment like, well, they're building a team together or whatever, and what are we supposed to do against something like that? What are people like us supposed to do in a world with a Justice League or whatever? And Luthor says something to the effect of, well, it sounds like we need to have a league. Shouldn't we have a league of our own, And then that should get you thinking as a comic book nerd, oh, okay, there's an Injustice Gang. I think there was an Injustice League. And so that certainly seemed to indicate that if there was going to be another Justice League movie going forward from the Whedon cut, it was going to not feature Darkseid. It was not going to be this trilogy type thing or whatever, but it was going to be an Injustice League story. But now there's no reference to that. And as far as we know, Luthor and Deathstroke are working together, and that's the end of it. There's no other plans to gather together other villains, But what Lex does say to Deathstroke is interesting. He reveals Bruce Wayne's identity to him. So that could present a whole bunch of interesting wrinkles for whatever this version of Batman appears in next, I don't know if that will be referenced at all in the Flash movie, Yeah, I don't know. Probably not. But in another Justice League movie, I think it would definitely be referenced if they follow this continuity. Okay, my final sticky of notes. My gosh. So let's see here. Um, oh yeah, we got this flash forward, which this felt a little bit possibly self-indulgent. I felt like of all the epilogue things, this is the one that we didn't need because we already had established, yes, Darkseid's still coming. Yes, there's still a threat we need to prepare for. But then they took one more chance to go to have a flash forward that Bruce Wayne is having as a nightmare and show this extended scene in this dark future where apparently Aquaman Arthur is dead and Mera and Deathstroke and Batman and the Joker, oh, and Cyborg, are like in a team together trying to be a resistance force against Darkseid. This scene also reminded me, I hadn't mentioned this before here or in my review, Mera seems to be sporting a British accent throughout this whole movie. And she doesn't have it in Aquaman. I liked it. It was weird. I was like, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to square this in terms of canon with the other movies because she doesn't have a British accent in those. And then at one point I just shrugged and said, well, Princess Leia freaking had a British accent in a few scenes in Star Wars and then dropped that like a bad habit before long. So maybe there's just certain circumstances when she's representing Atlantis, or maybe she's got some kind of internal reasoning for why she would use a British form of the English language as opposed to a more relaxed American form. I don't know. I'm willing to say, there's probably some cultural explanation for why she would be inconsistent. I do like the way it sounds coming out of her. I like her voice, and I like the character with that accent a little more than with just an American accent. Okay, let's talk about Jared Leto's Joker. So, yeah, I am intrigued by this performance. In my review of, well, I don't remember if I actually said this in my review, but what I've said on and off, probably also in my review, about Jared Leto's Joker in Suicide Squad is that I liked his performance. I was interested in his performance. It was the writing that I didn't like, that I was having trouble connecting with. I was reminded about his laugh. He does an odd, it's like, it's not this, it's this, almost like this laid back, and I'm not sure what to think about that. It's this kind of weird croaky kind of laugh, and I give him lots of credit for just trying to do something different with performing this character than has ever been done before. And I think I saw more of what he was going for in this scene than in what we've seen in the Snyder cut. There's not much reason I can think of for him to be in this. I can't help but wonder if Snyder just really appreciated what Leto was going for and maybe had an inside track into what he was going for. Because remember, Snyder was involved as as a producer and had his hands, his influence in multiple movies at the time before Justice League came out. And so he would have, I think, had some influence over things going on, at least in pre-production and during filming, for the Suicide Squad. So I can't help but wonder if this is kind of him wanting Leto's Joker, which was criticized in the Suicide Squad, to kind of get another chance in front of audiences. And I'm glad that he did, because I do see more potential for Leto's take on this character in this scene. Part of it is the makeup. He has more of a creepy look to him in this than he did in Suicide Squad. But the performance, too, is pretty much carried over. It's not quite as bombastic, and the sense doesn't quite have the sense of showmanship. It's more of, he reminded me of the kind of character you would see in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like this creepy, mute person living in the backwoods that's just like messed up. I mean, he felt like he had a more grounded and believable type of personality disorder than I've seen him in some other things. Not as grounded and believable as the Joaquin Phoenix, Joker movie, but something that's in between what we've seen in movies and the Joaquin Phoenix Joker. And I liked that, and I would be interested in seeing more of that. I'm not ready to say, dang, I loved his take on the Joker, but I'm super intrigued by it and would really like to see what more he would do. And I also wonder if, in addition to giving Leto's Joker another chance, this was in some small way Snyder wanting to see an Ayer cut. Suicide Squad is very famously now a movie that was majorly tampered with, and control was taken out of his hands almost to the same degree that Justice League was taken out of Snyder's hands. And a lot of fans have been clamoring for an Ayer cut of Suicide Squad, and I'd very much like to see that as well. As I understand, there's a lot more Joker in that version of the movie, and I would love to see more of Leto's version of the characters. So we'll see if steam picks up after I think if this movie does really well and gets a lot of subscriptions for HBO Max for a month, they will take that data and say, okay, especially if the subscriptions hang on and people are still watching it again in the coming months, because they can track why people are getting subscriptions based on seeing what they're actually watching. So if they get a lot of data saying, oh man, people are watching this movie, and then they're watching it again, and then they're watching it again, and then more people are watching it. So they can really collect data in some fantastic ways now. So yeah, hopefully that was Snyder not just treating us, but also trying to do what he can to get the Ayer cut to happen. I would very much like to see that. We've got another reference to Lois being the key. It seems like they really want to, that Snyder really wants to do something with this future alternate reality that they're trying to avoid, and I just wonder what that could look like in future movies. I do want to wrap this up. This is getting way more long-winded than I had intended. But, Joker makes a reference to alternate timelines with Batman. He says, I wonder in how many alternate timelines you blah, 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 blah. Just the fact that he's bringing up alternate timelines. And we've seen indications of time travel. We've seen a reference to a multiverse. I think all these things are intended to prime us as audiences for stories in the future in the DC universe that have to do with alternate timelines and a multiverse. Now, maybe Zack Snyder has an inside track into what's coming with the Flash movie. Who knows? I have no idea what could or could not be going on behind the scenes. But I like that they are pushing this more and more, and would love to see... It just makes me all that much more anticipate what they're going to do with the Flash movie. And I absolutely believe that this movie... I don't think the Flash movie has even started filming yet. I think the script might be done, but or at least they know at this point what the story is going to be enough that they were able to cast some significant actors like Michael Keaton to reprise his role as Batman, and Ben Affleck's been confirmed to be in it as Batman as well. So it seems like the script is pretty nailed down at this point. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't still be very, very influenced by this movie if this movie is successful. And so I hope this movie is successful, and the executives realize that from a money standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to treat this movie as canon and make more movies like this, allow it to influence future DC movie decisions. Yeah, I can't wait to see what happens with the DC Universe and with the Flash movie in particular. Oh, I love this reference to the fact that he killed Harley Quinn. I had to ask my wife, did he say Harley? Did he say that he killed Harley? It's like, that's cool. And I love that moment. I'm not going to drop an F-bomb right now to quote it accurately, but he says, and I made her the promise that when I kill you, and make no mistake, I will effing kill you. Just like, I think as a fan, that's gratifying, because the F-bomb, even if you have an aversion to it, it has such power when used properly. And for those of us who have read Batman stories and seen Batman stories where he's up against the Joker for so many years, we've all asked ourselves the question, man, why didn't he just kill him? Why doesn't he just kill him? And it's because Batman is holding on to those values that keep him from crossing that line. But even so, it's gratifying to at least play with it as an alternate reality. And so it's gratifying to hear him say, I am going to kill you. And you believe him. You believe that he will, And yet the Batman that we ultimately want to have is still intact, because this is just an alternate evil future that we all hope and assume will be avoided in some way. Let's see here. Oh, and Deathstroke. The fact that Deathstroke was on that team in the future, I'm like, That's so interesting. Zack Snyder must really have some plans in his head for Deathstroke because he had him do the Lex Luthor thing. And then for these reshoots, this post-apocalyptic final Future Flash, it was reshoots. I know that much. This was not part of the original filming of Justice League. I'm not even sure if it was intended to be. I think this final scene might have been the bulk of the reshooting that was done, was with these characters. And so I think in this final scene, and the characters that are involved in it, we may be seeing a meta glimpse of the kinds of characters that Zack Snyder would like to prioritize and keep into his movies in the future. Because otherwise, I don't know why he would focus. Well, Batman, it makes sense why he would be there, But having Joker there, having Mera there, he's got a clear idea, and he was holding to it, or maybe even expanding upon it in making this last scene. I want to know what was going on in his head, why he chose these characters, why he chose this scene. Like I said, even the Snyder Cut did not need this scene at the end to establish that there's a future coming we really, really want to try to avoid, So what else motivated the decision to shoot this particular scene with these particular characters, covering these particular concepts? I will be watching that scene a number of times and doing all kinds of unreasonable, nerdy speculation. And then finally, we have the scene with Martian Manhunter and Bruce Wayne at the very end. Again, another scene that was not needed. I don't think we needed any of Martian Manhunter in this movie, but that was some great fan service. And again, if that's an indication, like the final Future Flash scene, of what Zack Snyder would love to see happen in the future with Justice League movies and the DC Cinematic Universe, then I am all on board. Yes, I want Martian Manhunter. I do, and I want all the things that he's planning on doing, because I'm up for that. Yes, we didn't get Superman back to the traditional, red, yellow, and blue, and being all that we know and love him to be, but I'm content for us to go on this long journey, on an arc. I'm content. There have been so many Superman stories told over the years in so many different ways. We've got this Lois and Clark, or Superman and Lois TV show that's exploring some totally different territory for Superman, and I think it's great. I am there's so much Superman you can get in so many different forms. There's a Superman thing out there for you to enjoy, to fit what you want. I'm content to just accept this as, well, we're just doing this for now. There'll be more Superman movies in the future. Maybe with Henry Cavill, maybe not. Superman's going to be around for a long time, and we'll see lots of great things, and we'll see the version that you're interested in. If you want the traditional 1950s Superman, maybe we'll get a trilogy of that at some point down the road, But I've been reading comic books long enough to know that there are so many varied interpretations for characters, so many different story arcs you can take them on that ultimately are not forever changers. They are things that are done for a season to explore something different, maybe an extended season of years, but we'll come back around, and so I am just ready to go on whatever journey they want to take me on at this point. So yeah, it's the same reason why I was, by the way, totally content for Superman to kill Zod in Man of Steel. First of all, that is a story that's from the comics. And second of all, it was totally in keeping with his character. It was like it ripped him apart to do that. So his character was not betrayed at all by having him kill Zod at the end of that movie. So yeah, anyway, I guess that's all I have to say for now. I would love to keep talking about this movie, but I'd even more like to watch it again. So maybe I'll stop recording, get this edited, and see if I can fit in just a little bit of it before I go to bed tonight. All right. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. ChristianGeekCentral.com